I actually just wanted to bring up another really interesting point that you brought up, which was the privatization of police, because something that I see, which is a major issue, right, is that there's a very low amount of police officers throughout the country. Last time I checked, it was about 180,000 active police officers throughout South Africa. But then if you look at the rate of officers available in the private security sector, there's about 450,000 private security guards who are active at this moment in time, which is more than double the number of police officers who are available. So, yes, how do you basically see that whole scenario playing out?
So there's a couple of things that come into play here. So one of the significant points that we need to take a look at, by the way, specifically in the context of policing, is the fact that only the South African Police Services currently has the ability to effectively be crime fighters. And municipal police actually do not have that ability, in most cases to make arrests and so forth. So interestingly, fairly recently, there was let me just call it up very quickly. Government Gazette number 52884, published 10 June, proposes sweeping changes to the powers of the municipal police. So there's a number of acts. And by the way, if you go to kanthanpillay.com, it's the top story there, where it talks about the various aspects of law that reserved the ability to actually follow up on particular crimes and made them the preserve of SAPs. And now, effectively, what is being proposed is that those powers also be extended to municipal police, so that they too are able to prosecute those crimes. And this, by the way, I must tell you, is a great step forward, because it means that Metro Police in places where we have them, which is primarily the big municipalities, are able to now go after real criminals in addition to just simply writing out parking tickets, which is, what their historic role has been, to stop us at speed traps and roadblocks
and speeding fines
and so forth. The proposal that I had in my book, which was, really something that I discovered when I was still a student in the US, and at the Princeton campus, the campus security guards, I only discovered after I'd gotten there, were actually deputized New Jersey state troopers.
Oh,
They're on the payroll of Princeton University, but they all have full policing powers. And in times of emergency, the state policing authorities are able to call upon them as part of a reserve force. And what I was proposing is that we look at all of these private security companies and actually put all of their personnel through a training process where they are effectively becoming, shall we say, reserve police officers with the power to arrest and prosecute particular crimes. And so there are two advantages to this. You're immediately increasing the number of people on the ground who are actually able to act upon criminality. So in my neighborhood, as an example, the armed response people will often apprehend criminals, but will have to wait for the police to then eventually pitch up to actually make the arrest and book them. And again, you'll go back to the old problem where the dockets get lost and these criminals are out on the street in a short space of time. Whereas if the private security people were actually deputized to function as police officers, they themselves would be able to then take the criminals across to the police station, fill out the charge sheets themselves, and ensure that the entire process goes through. And the overall impact of this also means that they then become they fall under the aegis of the police directorate in terms of ensuring that they are complying with the rules of policing, so to ensure that they are not, doing things that they're not supposed to do. Which makes
Yes.
effectively puts them under the authority of the what is it called? IPID, the Police and Investigative Directive. I think it's called. I spell it out in the book, but yes.
Okay.
So the entire idea is to find the most cost-effective way that we can to immediately increase our ability to tackle criminality at the lowest possible cost, which is the theme that I look at throughout the entire book. It's about, can we make this work with what we have? I think most governments around the world, the solution that they have is to throw money at a problem. But,
Right.
throwing money at a problem should be the last thing that we do.
Right. Well, that's actually such an intuitive way of looking at it, because in reality, what you effectively saying is we've got this sort of illiteracy problem, right? But then at the same time, you have your private security guards who can sort of join. They're CIRA registered. They've got their requirements their performance requirements that they've had to meet. And then at the same time, you've got this understaffing problem. And while you can, of course, see university graduates who are unemployed can join the policing service, before you even have to enroll them and train them, you've got private security jumping in. And I think that's really important. And something that definitely brings to mind is response times for crimes, right? Because generally, if you in an area where you see these private security firms and they have their patrol vehicles cruising around, what's great about that is that it's a preventative measure, right? And so on one hand, when criminals, or let's call them potential criminals, see these sort of security measures, it may dissuade them from committing crimes. But even if, let's say, they do take a chance to commit crimes, at least the patrol vehicles and the first responders are in the area in order to respond. Whereas sometimes I wonder, does it make sense to, solely rely on the police to respond? Because at the end of the day, I don't know, would the nearest response vehicle be in the vicinity? How far is the nearest police station? And yes, also just the fact that unfortunately, when you do call the police, that's after the crime has been committed, not before. So that's why I particularly like your idea of incorporating the private security sector into the police. I think that could be a really effective way of solving a problem, at least
You
on the
see,
short term.
but it also then forces a greater sense of discipline among the private security companies as well. Because right now, within these private security companies, and as you correctly point out, they outnumber the police forces by a significant factor. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the personnel who are driving these things are all cut from the same cloth. And the potential problems around that, particularly if you have armed response, which is what we all pay for. It's one thing to be armed. Okay, it's another thing to be able to use a firearm correctly. And more importantly, it's another thing to know when to use a firearm. Because you don't want someone who's trigger happy, who's immediately going to draw his weapon and do something that's entirely untoward. And I myself have been a victim of that particular thing, where an armed response person came into my property, and my dog lunged at him, and he immediately drew his firearm and shot the dog. Now,
Oh,
this was,
nice.
this was, close on 20 years ago now. And, it's still something that, tears me apart, because it was, so utterly unnecessary. But it comes down entirely to a question of, was this person trained to respond correctly in that particular scenario? And so, yes, we have private security, precisely because of the fact that the services that we pay for as taxpayers and as ratepayers don't work. But at the same
Right.
time, we have these, they are regulated to some extent. And don't get me wrong, I'm not in any level trying to throw shade at our private security industry, because I think, frankly, they are pretty much best in class compared to the rest of the world. But
Sure.
at the same time, I'd feel a lot better if there was an independent oversight body that one would be able to then refer people to in order to get, investigations underway, in order to ensure that they are complying with the basics of what one would expect. But these actually
Right.
require that the people in power understand what they are doing.
Right. No, of course, yeah, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to say. We can at the same time say, look, we're grateful for what we have, but there's always that room for improvement, and so let's do that, because unfortunately these sorts of incidents do happen, and
Sure,
yeah, we
but there's
need
the other
to.
elephant in the room far too often we actually ignore, which is roughly about a third of our police force is committed to the VIP protection units, which effectively
A
means
third.
that yes,
That's huge.
it's absolutely huge, and it's an utter disgrace.
My God. So would that basically include all the blue light brigades, or is that something
Absolutely,
else?
it includes all of the VIP protection units, the blue light brigades. Yep, all of those.
My God. And then I guess there's also the other segment, right, of police officers. However, not so much the police officers that are out responding, but rather those, on the admin desks working behind the scenes. So I wonder how many police officers there are who are actually out in the field. I'm a
Well,
little bit worried to get that number.
you see, the other controversial viewpoint that I expressed was that police officers need to pass a body mass index test. And my view on this is that a police officer who is not able to run 100 meters chasing a criminal has no business being a police officer. Very simply,
That's exactly
because
right.
yeah, but if you look at police officers across the country right now, uniformly they are grossly overweight. And there needs to be the starting point of saying that if you do not actually maintain a basic level of physicality, you should not be able to be a policeman on the ground. It's an entirely different thing for
Right.
detectives, which is, a question of investigating and following up. But if you are a police officer who is on the beat and you're carrying a firearm and you are expected to be apprehending criminals, at very least, for the love of God, please ensure that they're able to meet the basic levels of physical fitness. This is not too much to ask for.
Right. I don't even know, Catherine, that's just, some people are just overly woke. I don't understand how that's a controversial point. I mean, one of the most basic pieces of understanding when it comes to policing is that this is a physical job. If somebody is going to not cooperate with you, if somebody is going to attack or have a weapon, and we know what can happen when people are inebriated, I mean, surely having the right sort of physical fitness would make a lot of sense. I mean, and I'm not quite sure when it was. I'm pretty sure this was actually on multiple occasions, but I've read reports of police officers who get hospitalized and have even died from overheating and dehydration on runs. I just can't believe that this is something that happens. So,
Well, the
needless
fact
to
is that
say,
these are not quantified in the employment practices, and obviously one needs to look at this in the context of our labor laws in this country, which go out of their way to prevent discrimination at a number of levels. But the fact is that
right,
fundamental level of physical fitness is part of the job description, and it's not dependent on your race, color, or creed, but it is dependent on your ability to be able to run that 100 meters after the perp. It really is as simple as that.
Right.